welcome to this pod style series that I'm starting up here, which I think I'm going to end up naming Stream of Consciousness, not only because I don't know if I'll always have a planned out script I'm strictly going to follow through these sorts of video listenable style pieces, but also because I'm a Dream Theater simp, and out of the 3 pieces of media I would want to reference the most, Dream Theater seemed like the one that would have the most applicable possible titles, being, of course, Stream of Consciousness and Constant Motion. No, not Constant Motion. Constant Motion is off of Systematic Chaos. Systematic Chaos is what I was also thinking. I was also thinking things for Pokémon or Yu-Gi-Oh references as well, but I thought Dream Theater ended up being the most fitting, especially because Stream of Consciousness, the song, does have an added layer of referencing in regards to my own experiences, because I remember listening to that song on repeat when reading through a book in 10th grade language arts class, which was, as the teachers described it, a stream of consciousness style book, in which the events were not really carried out in a chronological sort of sense, because they were a collection of memoirs, essentially, from a North Vietnamese soldier. If you've never read The Sorrow of War, very good book, I'd recommend it. But that's not the actual topic of this video I'm going to be making today. Rather, today, what I want to start off with this planned pod-like series, is talking about the music that came out in 2022 and what of that I listened to and what my thoughts on some of it are. The way I'm going to try to give some structure to this otherwise completely stream of consciousness style way of presentation is by splitting it up into some of the stuff I listened to this year that I don't have really much to say on first, then moving on to stuff I have a bit more to say on, and then finally saving the stuff I have a lot of thoughts or passion or whatnot for the end. Kind of similar to what Fantano does with his end of year reviews, where he starts off not talking too much about albums, but maybe goes into a bit of detail on some of the early ones, and then gets a bit more detailed when getting to the top choices of his singles or albums, whichever it is he's talking about. To start off with this, the ones that I don't have much to say about, but I listened to and had some sort of impression enough to at least make me remember that I did listen to them, of course. We got Artificial Brain, their self-titled album that they released this year. Very good piece of technical death metal, progressive metal, whatever you want to lump their sort of genre as. Looking at my list as a whole, I think that this is the general genre that had the strongest showing this year, at least in my eyes. The tech death, deathcore, progressive metal, even though those are 3 different genres, kind of lumping them all under one umbrella is where I see some of my favorites coming from this year. And Artificial Brain is part of that pantheon, so to speak, but I don't really have too much super memorable from it from the 1 or 2 times I listened to it this year, but thought it was cool, and a lot of other people definitely think it's cool. I've seen it made the rounds as one of the favorite metal albums of the year, making Fantano's list, for instance, so figured it was certainly worth mentioning. Otoboke Beaver. I didn't end up listening to this until this EP until the whole year had passed. We got into 2023, but I did listen to a single or two off of it, and I really did enjoy the super fast, punchy Japanese punk that they provide. And once I did get around to listening to the whole thing, thought it was a pretty enjoyable listen. Definitely will try coming back to their stuff some more in the future. Rage from Germany. One of my favorite German thrash metal bands, thrash power bands. And they released an EP this year called Spraying the Plague, following up their Resurrection Day album from last year, which I thought was pretty good. And Spraying the Plague was kind of just more of what Rage usually has to offer. Not really too much to complain about. Some good covers of previous songs and a few newer songs as well. But just giving that classic Rage power thrash metal sound. Good stuff. Oceans of Slumber, Starlight and Ash. I first learned about this band when they opened for Insomnium, when Insomnium came on tour during their Wintergate tour. They were a very cool band to see live. And this new album was a nice, kind of chill, doomy experience as well. A couple fun cover songs like House of the Rising Sun also being on this album, so a nice little listen. Especially if someone wants to get into the band, I think it's a bit more approachable maybe than the others if you're not super into the doom sound. So that might be something to think about if you've ever wanted to get into doom metal but not go straight to the deep end, I suppose. Behemoth, Opus Contra Naturam. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but Behemoth. Really what I came away with thinking from this new album of theirs was that kind of like just more of the Satanist, and the Satanist is a pretty good black metal album. And I can pretty much say the same thing about this one. I like the sound of it. Fast, hard-hitting riffs and atmosphere, and then a pretty cool guitar solos overlaid every now and then. So yeah, good stuff from Behemoth. The Who, Rumble of Thunder. I don't think it quite matches up to the Gehrig. I hope I pronounced that right as well. But this Mongolian metal band keeps doing some fun stuff by combining the classic rock ZZ Top stylings along with newer metal stuff, as well as just the more traditional sounds of Mongolian folk music. It's more of that fun fusion. Wolfheart. First learned about this band when I saw them open for Children of Bodom a couple of years back. I guess a few years back at this point. And this was, again, nice bit of melodic, sometimes slower, sometimes faster death metal. Has that very noticeable flair of the Northern European style of just what this genre has to offer. Fallujah, Empyrean, saw them live back in, I think it was 2017, in a really small venue, so that was cool to see. And here we see another good example of a pretty good tech death, progressive melodic tech death release here. I even bought the album for this, so that shows even if I don't have a ton to say on it as of now, I certainly enjoyed it enough listening to it that I was willing to buy a vinyl of it, so yeah. Meshuggah, Immutable. I haven't listened to a ton of Meshuggah's stuff so far, besides mostly a few of the songs off of Obzin. I have listened to the album before in full, but can't remember much of it. I did just listen to it again recently, and I would say Immutable doesn't quite go as high for me as Obson does, but it is still an enjoyable piece of progressive metal, gent as the hip kids call it. Their brand of the progressive metal side of things, at least. Devil Wears Prada and Ocean's 8 Alaska are some names that I have seen, whether browsing iTunes or the general internets or the Rocksmith Customs. So I figured I'd check them out this year. And I thought Color Decay and Disparity both had some good qualities and aspects to them. Those being Devil Wears Prada and Ocean's 8 Alaska albums respectively. Color Decay, there are a few memorable moments, such as the ending song, Cancer, being a pretty good outro, I would say, to the whole album. And Ocean's 8 Alaska kind of giving me the vibes of Era, the band Era, with maybe in a bit slower of a tempo, I guess. As far as I'm aware, Ocean's 8 Alaska has been around longer than Era, so I still need to check out a bunch more of their discography, but these are good introductions, I would say, to them. I'm curious as to what the rest of their discography sounds like. I'm gonna have to check each of these out a bit more. Megadeth came out with a new album this year, The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead. And I can't say I disliked this album. It's probably about on par with the last few releases that they've had in terms of what they have put out instrumentally. I will say I don't think there are as many weird sort of takes, at least that I could pick out on here, compared to some of the stuff off of Dystopia, but try to leave the lyrical and messaging parts of this aside for now. Nothing really bad to talk about that I can think of that's just outwardly bad on this album. It's an enjoyable listen if you like the newer-ish side of Megadeth. Polyphia, Remember That You Will Die. There were a couple fun singles that I'd heard off this before listening to the whole album. Of course, Playing God being the one that kind of blew up on the internet. And then also seeing that Steve Vai was a guest guitarist on one of the tracks. That was pretty cool to see, and I did appreciate that song when I listened to that one. There are a couple songs off it with some slightly memorable things, like the ABCDEFG, I think that's the name of the song. It's memorable. I don't know if it's like my favorite, but it certainly has that memorability to it. That's about what I have in the not much to say, so to speak, category of this part of the video. Moving on to ones that I have maybe a bit more to say. Maybe. We'll see how it goes compared to the last section. The Weezer releases of this year. They went with a 4 seasons theme, 4 albums this year. And I gotta say, it was actually kind of enjoyable to see these come out, to see a stream of just nice bite-sized 20 to 30 minute thereabout Weezer releases throughout the year. Hearing references to Vivaldi or Beethoven or whatnot, the classical notes you hear, especially in reference to Vivaldi's Seasons, always a fun thing to hear. Of the 4 seasons that they put out, I'd have to say that Summer was probably my favorite of the bunch, even if some might say, like Fantano for instance, how reliant it is on catchy tunes, not really going super deep on stuff. I don't always expect super deep stuff from Weezer, and I would say that probably most people don't expect super deep stuff from them either, although OK Human might have been a bit more leaning in that direction. I still need to listen to that one a bit more. I've only listened to it through it once. Anyway, though, with the season stuff, yes, I'd probably say summer is my favorite, even if it is, as I've talked to one of my friends who's a pretty big Weezer fan and connoisseur, how he feels about Records. I feel about Records is it's a very catchy song. I love the punchy chords in the chorus. And he sees it as kind of another instance of Beverly Hills, where it's really just it's one thing is that it's catchy and that's it, which I can kind of see. I mean, the lyrics aren't exactly, you know, super deep, but again, I like the song. Being catchy doesn't automatically mean it's bad. Sometimes it can mean it's bad, but this is not one of those instances, I think, for me at least. I think it's just a fun little song, and that kind of summarizes the rest of the summer EP as well. Fall also had some cool stuff in that it had, I think, the longest song out of all of the Seasons EPs in its closer track, which was very fun to hear. It's always fun when Weezer does actually try to do a longer song. Don't know if we'll ever see another In Dreams again, but it was fun to see them try it at least. Or at least try to go in that direction a little bit. And Spring and Winter didn't have anything that were necessarily dislikable on it. I think out of all of the tracks on all of these EPs, some of the only ones that I can think of are a couple off of, one or two off of Fall that I was like, I mean, I don't hate them, but they are just kind of there for me. Can't remember the name of it. It's one of those songs that's named after a girl or something. Anyway, yeah, I thought it was an enjoyable 4 short albums from them this year. Ailstorm, 7th rum of a 7th rum. This one I thought was fun. I thought it was just, well, a lot of it was just kind of Ailstorm by the numbers as usual, but it was a pretty dang fun album regardless, and the fact that they also have acoustic versions and dog versions of all the songs on the album was also a musically interesting and comedically interesting follow-up to the actual bass album itself. But this is certainly just a bit of fun pirate metal as Ailstorm usually provides. Starting off with Magellan's Expedition, me being a history major myself, that's always a fun thing to hear starting off. It's always funny being a history major listening to bands like Ailstorm or Amon Amarth or whatever, and really thinking about, okay, how accurate are they being with some of their stuff here? Ailstorm, you know, not always being 100% accurate when they got songs about zombies eating their pirate ship, but, you know, they do throw in those songs about Magellan's expeditions and stuff like that too, and even if it's not trying to teach you everything that happened and what the ramifications of the historical events were, it's fun to see those at least get lip service paid at sometimes. Now, in terms of, maybe I should go thematically here for the next one after this. Mentalist, a power metal band that I found just browsing through the iTunes here. I tried to do a bit more iTunes browsing just to see if I could find anything new that was interesting this year, and this is one of the ones I found. This was another power metal band. The two big winners of this year for me would be that progressive tech genre of metal, and also the power metal subgenre as well. Mentalist kind of had this mix of, the album being called Empire's Falling, they focused a lot on themes of these big historical events, such as the French Revolution, that being the topic of the first song off of the album. And that really pulled me into this to begin with. Listening to some of the lyrical themes of some later songs on the album, though, such as the one about Columbus, where the entirety of the song kind of boils down to how brave he was for going across the ocean, which, I mean, fair enough, credit where credit is due. That history side of me comes out and says, okay, but what about all the ramifications of what happened after he made this voyage, and then the second, third, and fourth voyages he made? What about all the ramifications of that? It's kind of historically disingenuous to leave it at just the being brave for crossing the ocean narrative. But of course, you know, sometimes it is just about making a fun song, and pretty much all the songs I heard off of this one were fun songs. Except for maybe that one about the I love my ancestors and all they gave to me. Again, it's like, yeah, fine, you know, giving respect to your ancestors is fine on its own, but alongside the whole just focusing on Columbus's bravery and not talking about stuff after, it kind of just left that weird, incomplete historical narrative taste in my mouth. But at the same time, again, I thought it was enjoyable for the most part. Going on from there, Astronoid, Radiant Bloom. This album probably contains my favorite song of 2022, that being Eyes. It is basically everything I love about Astronoid's sound. They can have slow and high tempo songs, this one being one of the more high tempo songs, but all of them all carry this ethereal, spacey sort of sound, whether they are sticking to just tremolo chords and notes, or they put in some solos as well. They all carry this ethereal theme, and this one carries a super melodic while also being super ethereal theme to it, and I just love how it sounds. Eyes probably my favorite song of the year, and definitely my favorite song off of this record. Animals as Leaders, Parasia. This one is just pretty much more good Animals as Leaders. They keep trucking on, doing some of the best gent progressive metal, throwing in both melodic and dissonant sounds, but never going too far in the dissonant side to make it kind of weird to listen to, I think. And of course, seeing some of the music videos for this, like Monomyth and Absani, is that how you pronounce his name? Hold on, I'm gonna look that up real quick. Abasi, that's it. Tosin Abasi, his guitar playing is just always magical to watch and listen to, for that matter. So, and of course, the whole band is magical to listen to too. So, yeah, just enjoyable Animals as Leaders and stuff. I don't know if they'll ever make something that sticks in my head as much as Physical Education from their 2014 album, but I mean, Animals as Leaders is a fun yet deep, kind of mesmerizing listen. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, I forgot that Omnium Gatherum was from this year, not last year. And by this year, I mean 2022. It's 2023 when I'm recording this, but yeah, I thought Omnium Gatherum was kind of at the end of 2021, not in 2022. So, had to remind myself that that was also part of this year. And really, this one's kind of just like a smorgasbord of the various styles that King Gizzard has to offer. I think for that reason, it might even be like a good kind of intro point for people, just to be like, hey, this basically is a laundry list of what styles they go through. Not every single style, but a lot of their styles. I mean, you hear stuff that could clearly fit on Infest the Rat's Nest on here. You see stuff that might be a bit more at home on one of their other mini albums with different stylistic things. Still need to listen to a lot of their albums, actually. But this one, even though it doesn't have like a distinct theme it's going for compared to the other ones, I think it still has a good bit of value in that smorgasbord way of thinking of things. Creator with Hate Über Alles. Very good title track, and very good thrash album in general from Creator here. Some good themes about just the ways of destruction we're seeing in the world, and not what's the word I'm looking for that also starts division, that's the word, division as well. And though they fall kind of, I think, into the trap of everyone else who seems to make songs about divisiveness, in that they don't point out the exact societal or related reasons for why this divisiveness is happening. I think that the general idea of denouncing hate is a good thing to do either way. So, and then they also have songs detailing into ideas like even touching on environmentalism a little bit too, in a couple of them, war, all that kind of stuff. It's good to see those kinds of themes being discussed either way, even if it isn't in the deepest way. And it's just good sounding thrash. They remind me how much thrash rocks a lot of the time, even though I think of thrash as sometimes being a bit too derivative of itself over and over. It definitely reminded me that, hey, you know, thrash has, even if it does have similar sounds, I mean, all genres have similar sounds to themselves within the genre. So it's good to just explore these, well, genres as much as you want to. Don't really know how to put the feel I'm trying to go for there, but point is, thrash is good, power metal is good, progressive metal good. Genres are fun, even if we have the genres say, oh, all of these bands sound the same. No, they don't all sound the same. They all have their quirks, their little unique things. Go listen to them. Even if you think you've listened to it 100 times, you know, go listen to it. You might hear something again that's eluded your ears before. Coheed and Cambria, Vaxis 2, A Window of the Waking Mind. Coheed continuing their progressive rock, space opera stuff beyond the sagas of, well, Coheed and Cambria, the Amory Wars, which I just bought the books for when I saw them at their concert this last year. Gotta actually read through those. I'm most of the way through the first one. I need to get through the rest of them here. Anyway, Vaxis 2, I thought it was alright. My highlight of it, of course, being the single they put out in 2021 for it, Shoulders. Just a really punchy, almost funky kind of sounding riff, and then what I think are nice and lyrics to think about. I'm not sure what the word would be there. Lyrics to reflect on, whatever, for the chorus and such. But some others might think that they're a bit, you know, lyrics that have been done before, which they probably are, but the way that Claudio sings and the way that you have the instrumentation going, like I think it just brings it all together really well. So really love Shoulders off of that album. They have a nice dance rock inspired song off this album as well. Cut the Cord is a nice song to have at the later half of the album, as well as the longer ending track to the album. Always a fun thing to see a nice long track ending out, especially progressive works, but also a lot of not necessarily concept or progressive works. Certainly is one of the albums that's on the lower end of their whole discography for me as well. Nothing can really come close to the first 3 or even 4 albums that they put out. But it has its moments, it has its highlights. Gravedigger, Symbol of Eternity, back to the power metal releases of the years. This one being kind of related again to the Hailstorm Mentalist side of things, in that it's more historical here. It's mostly an album about the Crusades, and so I was kind of iffy on this and my thoughts on it, because it usually when you hear stuff about the Crusades, it does kind of tend to skew towards the Christianity side of things, as that is the more popular showing of it in just popular media in general. And I feel like there is some of that repeated here, but also in the final track of the album besides the bonus tracks. I'm not sure if it's bonus track or bonus tracks. I know there's at least one bonus track, but anyway. The ending track has lyrics along the lines of, killing for religion, that's dumb. Quote, rust in peace, if you will, but I thought that was a very fine bit of messaging to have to kind of, as a closer for this whole thing about the conflicts of the Crusades. If you've never listened to any history or read any history on the Crusades, it's wild stuff. It's like you have plenty of conflict even within the Christian communities, not just the Christians versus Muslim sort of larger narrative that's usually talked about in popular media when bringing up the Crusades. They do have that short little song off of here called Saladin, which is just kind of the generic sort of Middle Eastern quote-unquote sound. But I mean, fits into the whole concept that they're going for here. Nothing too offensive really about it at all. Just some good power metal here, I would say again. Arch Enemy, Deceivers. A lot of what I have to say about this album, kind of like with Asteroid, comes down to one song in particular. The Handshake with Hell, the opener track for Deceivers, is where I have a lot of my reverence for this album at the moment. I did end up buying a vinyl of this one as well, even though this is in the middle pack of stuff I have to say about this year. The fact that it has just multiple guitar solos, really hard punching riffs throughout it. Handshake with Hell, great intro track. I'd put it, if I were to tier list stuff here, I might even put it in similar standing with Nemesis. Probably one of, if not their most favorite or famous songs. But that's not to say the rest of the album wasn't enjoyable as well, because the rest of the album was enjoyable. It just didn't hit the highs that Handshake with Hell did. definitely worth a listen in the melodic death metal pantheon. Continuing with the melodic death metal sound is Amon Amarth, the Great Heathen Army. Couple catchy songs I remember off of this one, such as Saxons and Vikings, kind of falling into, again, this weird, is this actually staying true to the historical narrative thing? But, I mean, you can clearly tell they're having a fun time with this song, so I don't think it's too much, there's too much to take off for it for that sort of way of thinking. Hydrun, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but that one's also a very catchy tune that they put on here. And of course, other than that, it's kind of just Amon Amarth by the numbers. Maybe more newer Amon Amarth by the numbers is a bit better way to put it, but that doesn't necessarily mean bad. Still definitely an enjoyable listen. Blind Guardian, the God Machine. Another one I got a vinyl for because I thought that this album was a surprisingly good thing a surprise, I guess. Not surprise, I mean, yeah, surprisingly good in that I recognized the style that they went for on this one was a bit reminiscent of some of their stuff from, well, the 90s, like going back to some of their earlier sounds. I think I could definitely hear that happening here a bit. But also, of course, keeping to some of the stuff that we're more familiar with in the newer stuff. The Secrets of the American Gods, like that's just a fun display of their vocalist as well as their ability to set like just these epic sort of, well, sceneries in your mind, even though it's all sound, right? It's atmosphere, the feeling that it brings out. It's like power metal at its core right there. The abilities that they have to paint these pictures with sound in your mind. Metal Hellsinger was a video game that came out this year with a pretty killer soundtrack considering the bands they were able to get on to the roster for this OST, whether it be Matt Heafy from Trivium, Serge Tankian from System of a Down. They got Ginger on here, they got, I believe they got Arch Enemy's singer as well. I mean, the list goes on about just who they were able to grab for making the soundtrack for this game, and it came together great. Don't really have much to say about any specific tracks off the top of my head, but I can say that there aren't any that have disappointed me off of it. The only disappointment that comes from it is how the gameplay works in the game, and that unless you're keeping on rhythm and comboing off, you're not going to be hearing the vocals along with, or even sometimes all of the instrumentation if you can't keep your combos up. But hey, when you're going off those songs, they're going off too. Locrian. This one caught my ears, I guess you could say, in that even though listed under metal, I wouldn't think that many people would necessarily think of it as metal if they were to listen to this. The first song off of New Catastrophe, as this album is called, is almost entirely just silence, and then the one after is just very atmospheric. Really, the whole album is atmospheric. If there was a genre named atmospheric just on its own, that is probably what I would label Locrian as. They are very much a band going for creating a certain kind of atmosphere, and that has become pretty useful for my friend group as we do D&D style tabletop stuff pretty often, and having those as background for those games is pretty nice. Definitely a fun find I've had this year just scrolling through the browsing sections of iTunes, Apple Music, whatever you call it. Stradivarius, Survive, back to the power metal again, and once again showing that this genre is not dead. It did not die in when the 80s died. Did not die when the early 2000s saw a bit of a renaissance in it. Nope, it's still around, and Survive is just one of the several this year that shows that. Going off of some good themes of environmental destruction that's going on, political instability, kind of similar to what was done in Creator's album this year, but yeah, it's just a fun power metal album, classic sounding power metal album with those nice themes and messages as well. Good stuff from Stradivarius this year, I like it. Hololive had plenty of songs from all of their talents this year. I don't remember too many of their sounds off the top of my head, and I definitely didn't get to listening to all of them because I'm bad at keeping up with all and everything Hololive does all the time, but ones that I definitely remember more than others are Q by Callie and Gura. That's the one I definitely remembered the most. I'm Your Treasure Box by Marine, Astro Girl by Sana, and Doggy God Street by Corone. But then also I did listen to Play Dice by Bales, Nezumi Scheme by Callie, and Parasite D2 by Muna. Q is just a very fun, fast-paced duet between Callie and Gura with some hard rock metal vibes to it as well as some electronic. So good fusion of sounds on that definitely, and fusion of languages too. Doggy God Street's like a funky sort of, yet also kind of, I guess, Halloween sounding sort of stuff, as that's kind of Corone's vibe a lot of the time. I'm Your Treasure Box, Marine, it's definitely become a meme both within and in certain cases outside of the core Hololive meme pantheon, but it definitely has its good musical sounds to it outside of just its meme applications. Astro Girl by Sana, it's got that, I don't know what you call that styling of electronic sort of music styling. I don't know what the word to use here besides styling, but the stutters. Yeah, I don't know what that term would be. Staccatoed stutters, I don't know. But it's a fun sounding song, and even though Sana's graduated at this point, it's still it was a nice song to have her put out while she was still in the group. If there was only one song that she had to put out, this was a pretty good song, although she did say how she used to sing in a metal band. I wish we could have heard her metal singing at some point, even if she said she doesn't really do that anymore, which I can understand. It's probably not great on the vocal cords all the time to do that. Still would have loved to hear it though. Play Dice, I remember hearing that once and it was just kind of this fun high tempo song. Nothing too much that I remember off of it, but didn't dislike it. Nezumi Scheme, kind of a fun music video to go along with that one. Parasite G2, kind of a melancholic, I don't know if melancholic's the right word, but definitely thinking there are some sadder undertones with what that song is going for, despite the kind of upbeat sounding chorus. It's upbeat in the way that you're like, huh, you know, the way that this is delivered, the way that the atmosphere of the instrumentation is giving. I'm guessing this is supposed to be kind of sad in the end of what the song is trying to accomplish, but definitely can feel those feelings that it's trying to put across. So yeah, good stuff from that. Kind of wrapping up this section of what I have some stuff to say about, so to speak, is Slipknot, The End So Far. And that's fitting, the end so far, in terms of this section of the video. Slipknot is kind of has a weird place in my internal rankings in terms of what music I like. In that a lot of the time I'll listen to their stuff, not be a huge fan of it the first listen or two, and then come back to it years later and think, oh wow, this is great. Most notably seen when I listened to Iowa, where the first time I listened to it I'm like, this is really drony, I don't think there's really much here. And I come back to it and go, wait a minute, I don't remember sounding this dynamic and punchy as the last time. So yeah, I tend to come around on Slipknot when I listen to it, you know, more than once. And the end so far, actually, this one I thought was pretty good on first listen. You had some decent variety in the sounds that they were going for on their songs. Definitely worth a listen, I'd say. On to the last sort of section I have here set aside is where I have kind of my favorites, or the ones that I have the most that I want to talk about. Starting off with Persephone, Metanoia. We're back to that progressive, melodic, tech death sort of genre leaders again here. And really, we got a few really nice songs off this, whether it be Merkaba, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Let me see if I can find this again. Merkaba, yeah, I'm just gonna assume that's right. Katabasis, also fun. Anabasis, that trilogy they have on there, always nice to see when they have these multi-part songs, whether it's progressive metal or not. Those typically be fun things to listen to. The main thing that's I have something to say about this is how they have part 3 of Consciousness on here, which is a follow-up to parts 1 and 2 of Consciousness that were on Spiritual Migration, probably their best album. And I have mixed feelings about whether I think Consciousness Part 3 lives up to being part of this saga of songs. It's been, what, about 9 years since they last released the Consciousness saga. This is the third part of it, so 9 years later they add on to it. And it definitely has a different sound than the first 2 parts. And yeah, with Consciousness Parts 1 and 2 being considered basically perfect, not just in my eyes, but by a lot of metalheads' eyes, that does put some pressure on Consciousness Part 3 to deliver. And in some ways I think it does. It's certainly going for its own vibe. It's going for its own progression in the way that it wants to build up to the payoffs that the song has to offer. And they're not the same ones as what part 1 and 2 do as a pairing. So in that sense, if the saga continues on, I think that part 3 here will act as a really good kind of transition point, maybe. But even if they don't decide to continue the saga, it has its own kind of story that it sets up it being longer than, I think longer than the first two parts of consciousness combined, that I think maybe it'll be able to stand as a ending to the consciousness saga if they want to end it there. But I can also definitely see them continuing it on, as part 3 does leave room for either way to go. Good album. Good album all around. Scorpions come out with Rock Believer in 2022, and they have some fun stuff off of this. They have some catchy songs. They have a couple songs that try to capture sounds both from their more recent stuff, but also from their classic stuff. Shining of Your Soul is something I could definitely hear coming off of Fly to the Rainbow or Taken by Force or In Trance era Scorpions. Roots in My Boots is one of their catchy songs off this album. Kind of gives combinations of their newer sound with also kind of going back to Love Drive or Animal Magnetism kind of energy as well. When You Know Where You Come From is a really powerful closer song, I think, kind of going back to the same closer vibes as songs like Best Is Yet to Come, or maybe even Send Me an Angel, but I don't know if it goes quite that far. in my ears at least. Seventh Son, a song that also enters my mind a bit more often than the others. That one kind of is a bit more derivative of their newer stuff. Gas in the Tank is the intro song of the album, and it's kind of along the same lines as the intro stuff from Return to Forever. Really, I mean, it's an enjoyable album. There's some stuff on here that I really like. There's some stuff on here that's kind of just, yeah, I'll listen to this. It's definitely not among their classics, but it shows that Scorpions still has some stuff that they can do. Even going on, what is this, more than 50 years at this point? If I'm doing my math correctly. Allegion put out Damnum, which is Latin for loss, I believe. And this one is probably what I would consider my favorite album if I had to do rankings here. I'm not trying to do rankings with this video, but if I had to, Damnum would probably be my single favorite album of the year. Because, well, once again, we got a really good progressive melodic death metal record on our hands here, and a lot of the songs really do give this melancholic, also atmospheric and sort of a depressive but not overly depressive sounding way. It really does capture that feeling of loss, as the title is so suggesting. The Dopamine Void Part 1 is just an amazing short lead-in to the Dopamine Void Part 2. And while sounding quite drastically different from each other, both play their roles pretty well in describing what a dopamine void can feel like. They definitely set up that atmosphere. And really, the titles that come with each of these tracks very much play into this larger atmosphere and theme they're going for as well. Of Worms and Beasts, Bastards of the Earth, Only Loss, like just all of the theming they do, as well as the progressions of the riffs into the solos and the bridges, like it all just comes. It's good songwriting across the whole album. I know I put this in the good amount to say section of this video, but really, I mean, there's not really much to say besides that stuff. I guess I have it in this section because I really do kind of just want to gush over and over about the Dopamine Boy Part 1, even though it's the shortest song on the album, unless I'm forgetting like a transition track on there. Am I? Nope, that is the shortest, yep. Saturnine, Into Ember, to carry my grief through torpor and silence. I mean, good. The naming was on point for this album too. Good stuff. Probably my favorite. But it does have to go up against a few other good ones, such as Ghosts and Para. This one, it seems like it's been a bit mixed, or maybe I just think that because I know Fantano gave it a middle of the road rating when he reviewed the album. And there are some things that I can definitely agree with in terms of that way of looking at it, but at the same time, I think as a concept piece, this album is only outdone by Ghost in Prequel. Prequel is definitely their best concept piece, but Impera definitely works well as an album that flows well. Prequel flows well and keeps to its theme very well, I think. Impera strays from its theme a couple times, at least in my eyes. I mean, maybe I need to go back through and really analyze those lyrics and see if there's those metaphorical or hidden messages that really come down to the overall idea of empire. But there are definitely songs on there that do bring you back into the idea of, oh yeah, this is an album about empire, whether it be the intro self-titled track setting up this grandiose epic feeling, going straight into Kaiserion, which definitely gives you this introduction into what the triumphant sort of feeling that an emperor must have when he ascends the throne and all the people are on his side as they follow this propaganda or this idea for a great nation that he set up. And then continuing on with Spillways, kind of continuing this whole fun sounding early part of the album, which then starts going into realms of a bit more sinister type things with Call Me Little Sunshine and Hunter's Moon and Watcher in the Sky, eventually going all the way down into the 20s, which seems to be that point where Fantano decided, okay, yep, I'm giving this album a 5, not something higher, because he really does not like 20s, it seems. I think it is a fun, campy thing, and I don't think it overdoes the camp because, well, I think the point of it is the camp because of the subject matter it's going for. It's going for the idea that these emperors or these leaders of these places that are either trying to be empires or want to morph into empires because of the leaders or the atmosphere that these leaders have set up are going for is this campy thing. It's this, as the album art kind of shows, if you've seen the album art that comes with the vinyls for this or the CDs, or you just look them up online, what some of the art for these tracks are. I mean, 20s has a big baby-esque Trump statue on it, so that kind of shows you the idea of what they're going for, and I think it does capture that. And hey, it's got a 6 solo in it too, So there's that as well. Those horns definitely give off this idea of trying to give off this more important than it seems sort of grandiose ceremony, coronation kind of atmosphere. And then, of course, before we get into the very amazing ending I think the album has, you get things like Darkness at the Heart of My Love and Griftwood. I don't know why Fantano compared Griftwood to, I think it was Ain't Talking About Love, because really Griftwood sounds a lot closer to Make It Real by Scorpions. I just noticed. I was listening to Animal Magnetism again recently, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is like the exact same arpeggio here for the main riff. We'll just ignore that for now because it sounds sick in both of the songs. So, and I mean, the bridge, I guess, of Griftwood, like that one gets stuck in my head all the time. Holy Mother, you shine like the sun and the moon and the stars in the sky. I love it, but not quite as much, I don't think, as I love the ending of this album, because for one thing, it brings it back to the beginning. The ending riff at the very end of the song circles back to the starting 4-note thing at the start of the album. It's just, yeah, sometimes those 4-note, 4-chord, whatever passages just hit hard, and this is one of those cases. Not to mention just even before it gets to that ending part where all those emotions just like break the floodgates, it brings back to that overall theme of Empire, in this case how the Empire is slowly fading away into the annals of history. There's certain songs off the album like Hunter's Moon or even Griftwood in some ways that I don't think really go completely into the Empire theme, but hey, again, maybe I need to just go back and reanalyze the lyrics, do some... Well, there's no music theory, is there? There's only game theory, film theory, and food theory. That should be his last one. Why music theory? Why isn't he doing that for his last one? Anyway, yeah. Impera, I really liked the album. I definitely see its flaws, but I also definitely see its high points, and it has some pretty high points. The Mars Volta came out with a self-titled one this year, and from what I thought about the album, it seems to be basically what everybody else thought about the album, in that it isn't Mars Volta as we've known them completely throughout their discography. It feels much more stripped down, it sounds a lot more stripped down, both in terms of song length and in terms of instrumentation. There are not as many layers as there are with the rest of their very kind of progressive rock sounding repertoire, like a modern Pink Floyd kind of deal. But the thing is, it still sounds pretty dang good. His voice is still on point, the vocalist, his voice is definitely still on point. The way in which they use the limited instrumentation they have still seems to bring everything together pretty well. When they have songs that do go a bit more into the longer but still not nearly anywhere as long time frame or runtime as their historically longer songs have been, those definitely are highlights on here. They go through a few different sorts of sounds as they travel through different passages, different movements. They've got some variety from song to song in terms of what the general atmosphere they're going for. Trying to remember what the name of some of the songs here. Mars Volta. It's Graveyard something. Is it Graveyard Love, I think? Yeah, Graveyard Love. Kind of like this weird... what's the word? The vibe is very, like, subdued, maybe is the word. And again, a lot of the songs off this are a bit more subdued than albums in the past they've had, but I really do like how a lot of the songs come together, even if they're a lot shorter than what they usually do, even if they're a lot more stripped back in terms of instrumentation that they normally do. And that's kind of just the general idea of what this album delivers. It's kind of the same feel as like when In Flames released I the Mask, in that it's not classic In Flames really at all, I don't think. And I don't think a lot of people, I think a lot of people agree with that, but it also seems like a good amount of people, at least from what I could see from online comments and stuff, enjoyed I the Mask in what it did differently. I mean, This Is Our House I did not like off of that In Flames album, but the point of it is it's kind of the same idea here. It's like it's got its own sound to it, and it is a dang good sound, even if it isn't what we always wanted, or want to hear again, rather, from these bands. So yeah, Mars Volta, self-titled, it's a good listen. Neon White, another video game, and this video game has a dang good soundtrack. Makes me think of like a combination of Undertale with Earthbound and, well, it depends on the singular track as well, but you've got some of those like weird atmospheric things. A lot of the time it is like high tempo techno sounding stuff, but every now and then you'll hear some guitars come in, some switch up and what the instrumentation is. Maybe it sounds a bit more spacey sometimes, maybe it sounds a bit more just plain dance rave sort of techno. It is a fun soundtrack all around, and each world has its own vibe to it, whether it's the intro world where you just hear Neon White and do 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 do, just great melodies going around the place. Other times it'll be more subdued melodies and a bit more kind of just leading on to a weird atmosphere that's trying to set up. Yeah, the Neon White soundtrack, very, very good stuff. Can't say that there was a song in the soundtrack that I did not like. We'll go with finishing up the video game soundtracks that I have some stuff to say about here with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's soundtrack. Pokemon Arceus also released this year, and it had a fine soundtrack in that it was going for that more atmospheric feel, kind of being a bit more subdued in the background. Scarlet and Violet, on the other hand, not necessarily keeping to the classic Pokemon sound, but more like the modern style of what we expect Pokemon music to sound like, with some interesting mix-ups in there as well, though. Most notably, as I think many people have found out, the Team Star themes, whether it's the grunts or the outside battles as you go through their bases, and of course the Team Star leaders. It is just that the Team Star bosses, they did not need to go this hard on these tracks, yet they did. And I love Game Freak for doing it, because they literally just put classic metal in as their themes. You know, with a bit of trance, with a bit of power metal, you know, subgenres tied into it, but it's just, you hear these blaring guitar solos going, you got these nice pounding riffs going. It's just Team Star boss music, amazing. Not to mention you have Toby Fox, who did the Undertale soundtrack, doing some tracks in this as well, such as the raid battle music. I believe he also said that he did some of the wild area music as well, the open area music. I forget what they call the open area in this game, but the fact that Toby Fox is in this, and you can definitely hear the Toby Fox when it comes to the songs that he was a part of making on this. I mean, that's always a joy to hear as well. So, was very happy about especially certain parts of the Scarlet Violet soundtrack. The only parts of it that I was not a fan of was how they kept the football, and by football I mean soccer for Americans, but football for the rest of the world, chants in the gym battles. It's like, it made sense in Sword and Shield, because, you know, you were fighting in the football stadiums, but here it's like you got 12 people around the gym field the majority of the time watching your gym battle. Like, you're not going to hear these large crowd chants going on. Like, come on, that's you're breaking my immersion. But no, Scarlet and Violet, good stuff all around for the most part. Got introduced to Psy, a Japanese metal band, their album Shiki this year. And after listening to this, I was like, wow, just fun combination of some traditional folk Japanese music combined with, well, doom metal and thrash metal, power metal, these different fusions of metal together with Japanese folk sounds. And the thing is, not all of their previous albums are like this, because I started looking into their previous albums after getting introduced to them here with this album, and they got a good variety of sounds across their discography and within each album as well. But yes, it's kind of funny I put this in the Good Amount to Say album, because really that's what I have to say about this. It's a very fun fusion of these sounds. I guess one thing I can say is, for some of the songs, they do stick a lot more to just this slower tempo, the going for setting up the atmosphere of what Shogun era stereotypical kind of sounds you would think of, but then also just having these high tempo shreddy guitar riffs at times, or solos as well. So they kind of run the gambit with that whole thing as well. Avantasia had a paranormal evening with the Moonflower Society this year, and for one thing, it was just fun being able to see all the guest features they had in here. They had Jeff Tate from Queensryche. They had why is his name escaping me? It's my third favorite band. Come on. Michael Kiske from Halloween. Both as some of their guests on here, as well as a few others. But those ones stuck out for me because I love those bands. And this is just another example of how power metal, along with the progressive metal umbrella, really stole the show this year in terms of music for me. A lot of this album I kind of would describe, well, maybe not a lot, but a few of the songs on this album I would definitely describe as Journey meets power metal. Journey if they were a bit more power metal, such as In the Shadows. I don't remember if that's the exact name of this song. An Evening with the Paranormal... No, what was the... A Paranormal Evening with the Moonflower Society, that's the word. Is it? I think it might have just been called the Moonflower Society. Welcome to the Shadows, that's it, yeah. Yep. Welcome to the Shadows. And then Arabesque was a really good closer for the album too. It's like the sound of the title might make you think, oh, it's gonna have more of those Phrygian scales, Middle Eastern sounding thing, which it does have a bit of, but then it also has a lot of bagpipes. We're going with more of a Celtic sound for a lot of the sound in this song. But yeah, aside from these, you got a good variety of the exact directions they decide to go for the classics of what Avantasia has done power metal wise, as well as what the genre as a whole does power metal and symphonic opera metal sort of sounds. To kind of wrap up with the albums I have to talk about for the year, and some singles too. I've talked about a couple singles too. Is Lorna Shore with Pain Remains. Lorna Shore, I actually remember hearing first walking through the mall, just entering one of the stores in the mall and hearing the store have a Lorna Shore song on their intercom, whatever you want to call it. It was like a shoe store or some sort of brand store in that sort of way. But I was like, what is this? This sounds familiar. And then, so I sound hounded and it says Lorna Shore. I'm like, well, I've never heard of this before, but that guitar solo was pretty sick sounding and the vocalist sounded pretty familiar to me, so went to look up the song later. The song was great. The rest of the album, it was their 2020 album, by the way, didn't really stick with me that much on first listen, but thought it was cool. Kinda didn't want to check out their new one until the very end of 2022 because I couldn't remember too much of an impression being left on me, but I listened to it and, well, this one left a lot more of an impression on me. This one I really, really liked. I mean, the title being Pain Remains and the atmosphere that I keep using atmosphere as a word, but I mean, hey, it fits the theme of what they were going for here. Very much you can hear, I think it's a new vocalist if I was reading the briefs of this album correctly, the reviews of this album correctly. The new vocalist is really top-notch with their delivery. I'm not usually a huge fan of just guttural sort of growling and screaming and such, but the way in which it combines with the both subdued melodies and also more forward-facing melodies, and then also just the very down-tuned riffs at times as well. Like they really did a good job of balancing out all of these different sounds together. Normally I am not as huge a fan of some of the deathcore and metalcore stuff because they rely too much on the down-tuned chugging and breakdowns and such, which are fine, but I'm usually there a lot more for the melodic side of things. And maybe that's why I like this one more, is I think than the 2021, as I think they go a lot more into balancing the two out, the melodies and the down-tuned riffs and chugging and such. But even apart from that, it's just the crafting of these songs I thought was really good. Some of them I think can be sounding a bit samey across the board, like they do follow a similar sort of styling, I think, if I remember correctly from the last time I listened through this album the whole way through. Same kind of structure for each song, I guess is the word. But I mean, hey, that's something that you see in any genre again. Doesn't make it an invalid criticism though. I think that criticism is fair to give to this. But hey, that Pain Remains trilogy, the 3-parter they have at the back end of this album, is dang good. The rest of the album also dang good. It's just that's what I have to say about it. I can definitely feel the idea of the Pain Remains title going through the minor scale, sort of melancholic, yet also oddly inspiring solos and melodies that they're able to pump out with these tracks. So with that, I kind of come to the end of the list of the albums and singles and songs and such that I wanted to talk about for the year of 2022, the music that came out in 2022. I didn't really want to make it into a tier list, and I've kind of given my thoughts of what the top releases of this year I thought, for me at least, were, but just as a quick review: Allegiance, Damnum, Ghosts Impera, however you pronounce that, Persephone's Metanoia, Lorna Shore's Pain Remains, Avantasia's A Paranormal Evening with the Moonflower Society, the Neon White soundtrack. Definitely ones I think are worth checking out, as well as a bunch of the other ones on here, but those ones especially, I would say. The Mars Volta's self-titles is pretty fun too, I think. Let me just list off the whole other thing. Well, that's probably a good place to cut it there. What I'm planning to do is do another one of these soon for the games that I played in 2022, or at least the games that came out during 2022. I might talk about the ones that I played in 2022, despite not coming out in that year as well. But yeah, that's my first installment here of Stream of Consciousness. Might do a bit more refining of it as we go along here, but I'm hoping that this introduces some of you to a few suggestions of what to listen to, or some ideas of, or maybe some alternate perspectives if you have listened to some of these already. I know I certainly want to hear alternate perspectives on these, as I did look up a few thoughts of what people have of these, some of these at least, before giving my own thoughts, but a lot of these I also don't know really any of the general audience's thoughts on. So if you have any thoughts on any of the ones I listened to here, or any that I should have listened to during 2022, yeah, I'm all up for hearing those. Leave some comments. I'd be happy to hear what you have to say about them. Alright, that's my stream of consciousness for today.